Welcome to Rockstar Doctor Life. I'm Melissa Longo, and each episode, my guests and I will bring you fresh, fun ways to rock your life as a health professional and create a business that aligns with who you are and the life you want to live. Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Rockstar Doctor Life. I'm here with another very interesting chiropractor. I'm learning a little bit about him in our pre-chat, and I'm excited for you to hear some of his journey and his story as well. Joining me today for a chat about all things life as a rockstar doctor is Dr. Jeff Langmaid. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. I am super pumped to be on. As I told you pre-roll, I've been following what you've been up to. I think it's awesome, and hopefully I'll maybe live up to the rockstar doctor. But we'll see. We'll let the audience decide.
Well, I know. I mean, a big part of my mission with the show is talking about life as a chiropractor, healthcare professional, that, you know, in our clinical practice, but also to really highlight people who are using their passion, their skills to create their own rockstar doctor life. And you've certainly done that. You've been in private practice, and now you're doing a lot of other interesting things with your clinical training. And I want to dive into that a little bit. So let's start from the beginning. For the docs who don't know who you are, what you're doing, give me sort of a capsule of like, who is Dr. Jeff? What do your days look like right now? And then we'll dive into some of the questions I have for you.
Awesome. I'd love to. So I started out, I guess I'll give like the 30-second, super condensed, like 20 years and 30 seconds kind of version. So I came into being interested in chiropractic, like many people, because my dad actually had a back injury. He goes to see a chiropractor, he gets well, and he's like, you got to meet this guy. That was when I was in undergraduate school. At the time, I was actually interested in being like a knee surgeon, but I was like, yeah, kind of wafting on it. I don't know about that. And my dad was like, you got to meet this guy. And turns out I meet the chiropractor, Dr. Tim Warren, in Warwick, Rhode Island. He becomes, sort of my mentor and just a great guy. And he was also the alumni president for Palmer College. So immediately when I meet him, he's like, you ever thought about being a chiropractor? And calls Palmer and sends information. Kind of fast forwarding, the more I learned about chiropractic, the more it resonated with what I already believed to be true about health and wellness, but never had a name for, because I never really had great exposure to it. So that sort of started my journey and my path. I eventually went to Palmer in Florida when that first opened about 15 years ago, which seems like, I don't know, a second ago and an eon ago at the same time. And then my practice life was kind of interesting. I practiced as an associate right out of school, actually for Dr. Warren, my mentor. I practiced for him as an associate. He was climbing Mount Everest. He was going to be the first Rhode Islander, which is where I grew up, to climb Mount Everest. And the climbing window for Everest is like February, March to May. And I graduated in December. So I went home, got 2-3 months of training, watched his practice when he went over to Everest. When he came back, I started my own private practice in Providence, Rhode Island, sort of like a cash boutique practice sort of thing. And then I made kind of the big jump, which is sort of what's led me to today, where I came back down to Florida and joined a large multidisciplinary group. And I worked within a huge hospital group, probably at the time, maybe one of only 10 chiropractors in the world that was practicing in a true multidisciplinary way. And then I went on to the largest outpatient surgical group to start their conservative care program, and stayed there for 3 or 4 years, which got me exposure to a whole bunch of different stuff. And as we sit here today, as we were talking about a little bit pre-roll, now I'm mostly involved in marketing and research, and I sort of run my own companies that help other docs sort of build and grow, hopefully in some traditional ways and some unique ways as well. So that's where it all started. And the cherry on top of all this is that as I got started in chiropractic school, I come to find out my great grandfather, who had passed right when I was a very, very small child and lived in Arizona as I grew up in Rhode Island, he had been a chiropractor and studied under BJ in the 1920s. And I got a whole bunch of memorabilia and all this cool stuff from Palmer College. So there was sort of this legacy looming in the background that I didn't know about at all until I got up and running.
That's a super cool story. And I think it's really great that you've had the exposure you did in the multidisciplinary settings, because clearly for me, knowing, where your career is taking you now in helping doctors, chiropractors build relationships with other healthcare professionals, and also teaching them how to market, and also being evidence-based. So let's talk a little bit about that. Like, you started your podcast, Evidence Based Chiropractor, I think about 4 or 5 years ago, probably right when I started my first podcast too, which is why our paths crossed back then. How did that podcast start? And then let's talk a little bit about what your mission is with what you offer docs with that program.
Sure thing. So a few years back, yeah, probably half a decade or so now, which seems absolutely nuts. I was thinking like, man, a podcast seems like a good idea. At the time, I was trying to add on like one new thing per year with the Evidence Based Chiropractor. So I had like a Facebook page, I kind of had an email list going, and those had started, but I was like, at the time, now this is going to be super ironic for anybody that's followed anything, but at the time I was like, I'm not going to be one of those talking heads shooting video. Now I shoot video like 10 hours a week. But at the time, the podcasting was like the first step in. So I was like, I don't need to be on video. It's audio only. I'm a musician as well. So I'm like, I know like gear and stuff like that. So I knew how to record at like a pretty good level. And it just was something where I was like, okay, and this is something I can do myself. So I started it actually just with that sort of thought process. I was like, okay, cool. I'll highlight stuff that I'm interested in, like some research papers, a little bit of marketing stuff, once a week. And this tells how, sometimes weird things are or how slow I am. But, I'm 30 or 40 episodes in before I actually realized the catchphrase, so to speak, which is it's marketing and research and the time it takes to get to your practice. I was just doing every episode around 20 minutes because like that was how long I was like talking about a subject before I was like, okay, like that's about good, not with any sort of big vision in mind. And as time went on, I was like, oh, this has like a format. And that's what seems to have sort of compounded the listenership over time, which I think is a good takeaway for docs out there interested in starting their own as well, is the most common thing that I get, still today is people that listen to the podcast more than anything else. And that's like surprising because I was like, oh, Facebook, Instagram, email, all these other things. I'm sure that they see me, find me, or hear me there. And I hear it time and time again that the podcast is sort of that entry point. And also that it's like, cool, every Monday morning at 6 a.m. Eastern time, I know there's going to be 15 minutes or 20 minutes. It's easy to digest and I get to move with it that way. And it's been something that's been a huge benefit for the reach of the evidence-based chiropractor over time because people still tune in. Now, I want to warn anybody, if you check out the Evidence-Based Chiropractor podcast, do not go back to like the first 50 episodes because you're going to hear somebody saying like, hello, this is it's brutal to listen to. So they pick up steam as things go on, but it's been a learning experience to say the least and fun.
Yeah, I think that's why we have to release them in order, right? Because we get better as time goes on, but it's good for people who've been listening with you to take that journey. And I think, you remind me of when I first started my first podcast and I had no business model with it either. And it was just like, I felt at that point in time, the first show I did was Rockstar Dr. Moms, and it was for women in chiropractic. And that was 5 years ago. There wasn't a lot of conversation, at least for me. I felt there was a gap. And it was just coming from my heart. I just want to have this conversation and have fun with it. I didn't expect it to turn into a coaching, business consulting programs, So I think listeners, if you have something inside you that, you're creative, that you just want to share, like something that's in your heart, like a mission, whatever that might be, I'm going to tell you to follow it because you never know where it's going to lead you. And it can take you down all these other roads like you, Dr. Jeff, that have been, not only profitable, but it sounds like quite fulfilling for you as well.
Yeah, I think that it's like sometimes it takes a while to sort of find that muse. And I think that that's a very good explanation that you just gave where it's like, results follow actions is something we sort of say in the Smart Chiropractor all the time. And it's like, sometimes you don't know what the result is going to be. And most of the time you can guess. And most of the time, if you guess, you'll be wrong, right? But the result will follow, but the action always comes first. And, taking the action, as you said, of starting your show years ago in like a niche, kind of a niche profession and then, women focused and that, cuts it down, even a little bit more. But as you explore that, you found high value there. Now you start to make connections, you start to see opportunities. And those are the things that are fun, number one. But I think it's also, every road is winding, but it's really walking down the road and taking just one small step each day that enables you to really explore the whole territory, right? And it doesn't have to be perfect to get started either, as both of us were just saying. It's like, man, like when we first got, if we knew now what we, if we knew then what we knew now kind of thing. But that's sort of also part of taking action is the process itself. And that exploration, I think, is so important. It doesn't make it any easier day to day. I mean, sometimes I look at stuff that I still produce and I'm like, you want it to be improved and better. But with that being said, I think it's important to try to appreciate the process as much as you can. Some people have more of a natural inclination. Some people, it's more of pushing rocks uphill to do so. But taking the action and appreciating the process, I think always leads to results, even if they might not be the initial result that you were after.
Yeah, we say a lot, in some of the programs I teach, and done is always better than perfect. And you learn by doing. You're going to fail forward or you're going to succeed. But in any event, you're going to get some data. You're going to see what parts of what you just did were great. How can you make it better? And if you never execute on any of your ideas, if you, like you said, if you don't explore the journey, then you're just stuck. And not to mention, for both you and I, if you and I never took action on the things that we wanted to do, people would never have benefited. So, listeners to your show would never have learned all the things that strengthen their clinical practice and helps them help more people. Same thing for me. So, just jump in and, make a calculated guess and to push yourself forward if there's something that's, in your heart to explore. How do you keep up with your content for the evidence-based chiropractor? Like, where does the inspiration come for you? Are you you must be an active reader, learner, like constantly diving into research that you share?
Yeah, my process has not evolved that much over time. So my process, basically, I'll break it down, actually, my exact process. So what I do is, if you go to sort of PubMed, which everybody just cringed, it's like, I haven't visited that website since I was in school, right? But PubMed actually does this really cool thing where they will email you automatically a listing of any research articles that are published within a window of your choice today, last week, last month, with whatever keywords you choose. So you could head over there, and depending upon your interest, you could type in, chiropractor, chiropractic, pediatric chiropractic. You can choose as many different keywords as you want. And anytime a paper is published that matches any of those keywords, either exact match or you don't have to do exact match. You can choose how you want to do that. They'll email you whenever you want, once a week, once a month, once a whatever, and a listing of those. I have it set so I get emailed every Monday morning, papers that hit certain keywords. Now, the catch is that, not every paper do you get full access to. Sometimes you got to pay for it and that sort of thing. But that quick listing gives me the opportunity to then click the papers and see, okay, cool. I'll read the abstract and see which ones are worth purchasing, which ones are the ones that I want to dive into more. And that's sort of how my process begins. And I'll sort of look at that and say, what's applicable here? What do I like? What do I not like? What's applicable? What has actual findings and doesn't just say, well, we'll try again next time. So I sort of sort through that way. And that's how I pick up on what I'm going to include for evidence-based chiropractor members, for the research for them to share with those other healthcare providers. And also it's sort of the fodder for what I want to talk about on the podcast as well. I'd say like 30% of the podcast, I talk marketing stuff, but 70% is probably research. And I typically try to focus around one single paper, not like a huge topic, and just sort of break it down in those 15 minutes. What are sort of the clinical pearls? What were the people trying to get across? And how can a doc utilize that information in their communication or practice style or, technique with their own patients? So that's sort of my process, and it hasn't really evolved throughout time. That seems to be the best way to go about it. Now, I will slap a huge warning on this. Yes, it still means you need to read the paper, which is brutally difficult. And it's like, the 9-page research paper, it's like takes an eon. You have to like translate. I always say, take the content, the paper, and translate it into the context. What the heck are they actually talking about? So that's probably more of the work than anything else. But that's how I source the papers to begin with. PubMed makes it pretty easy to do so.
And it sounds like it's something that's of interest to you. So it's not that taxing for you to pull out something that you feel is going to be interesting for you to read and then share with other people. Is there a focus? Is your podcast, is it mostly evidence and clinical research around sports, rehabilitative care, pediatrics, public policy? Like, is there any kind, or is it a little bit of everything?
Yeah, it's a little bit of everything that touches a chiropractor's practice. So I guess almost everything, all of my keywords are chiropractic related. So it wouldn't necessarily be like a public health topic that would be outside of what would impact a chiropractor. But there's a lot to do, not too much with chiropractic technique, but it might be, I don't know, how does an adjustment, affect veterans with, low back pain, neck pain, headaches. But then we'll go out, brain changes after an adjustment, changes in spinal pathway function after an adjustment, cortical drive changes, and that could be pediatric, it could be sport specific, it could be chronic pain individuals, it might be seniors. So it's really anything within that space. I would say the heart of it is the care that we deliver as chiropractors, which is getting in there and adjusting people. So that's sort of the heart of the research. And then it sort of meanders out from there across, different areas of interest. But I try to keep it pretty tight to things that are directly impactful to a chiropractor's day-to-day practice.
Mm-hmm. You reminded me that I need to start listening again. So thank you. Because I'm one of those people, like, of course I want to be up to date with current research, but I'll be honest, I don't want to read the long papers. But if someone could give me the Cole's Notes version and give me some gems that I can use in my practice or share with people, I would love that. So listeners, be sure to check out the podcast. And also with your podcast now, you're helping docs take this evidence and take what you're teaching them and you said some marketing and help them build relationships with other healthcare professionals. So let's dive into that a little bit. I mean, you worked in clinical settings and hospitals with all kinds of other physicians, other healthcare professionals. What are some of the biggest things that you took away from those experiences?
That's a really great question. So, a lot of it was based upon, failing, right? So a lot of it started, I guess I'll tell a little bit of a story and then I'll get into some specific of those key points. But when I joined the first group, I was like super excited and jazzed. It was new. It was unique. It's not for every chiropractor, and it shouldn't be. But for me, it was like a great opportunity, and it just fit what I was looking to do at that time. And one of the biggest things was I was like, they have infinite patients. They can't walk. It's like every doctor's schedule is overfilled. They're weeks and weeks booked out. This is great. And I show up, and now in hindsight, it's like smack my head kind of thing. But I show up, and my, like the first day, and my schedule is empty, and I'm like, oh, how am I going to get patients? Like, duh, like who wouldn't have asked that question? But I just assumed like, oh, they already probably have this system. How would they have that system? Of course they wouldn't in hindsight, but I assumed that there was this great system that was going to be able to direct patients my way. Not the case. So basically what happened was I started to reach out to the public and immediately got a call from our administrative and marketing departments like, hey there, cowboy, you're in a big group now. You can't just market our practice however you want. Like, we do ad spends, we do budgetary analysis. We know what we're doing a year ahead of time. I'm like, oh crap, like what am I going to do to build a practice here? So it was actually like, it's, what do they say? It was a necessity or mother of invention, that kind of thing, where I was like, I have to build a practice. I have to figure something out. And I can't really go external because I would have to go through this whole long process to get things approved, which was crazy, but just the way it was. So I looked to the other docs and I said, okay, my patients are already seeing them each and every day. How can I get there and bridge the gap? So I started spending a lot of time shadowing the other docs, just learning their clinical habits, how they go about things. And I went to grand rounds every week with the entire, physiatrist, surgical team. I'm just sitting, observing. And a couple of key things that I found were, number one is that research was helping them make a lot of their decisions. They'd go in and case conference on a surgical patient, and they'd be citing experience and literature to make clinical decisions. So that was sort of a light bulb where I was like, oh, this is how that could be important. And that's what sort of started saying, okay, if I can showcase research to them, it's probably going to at least crack the door. The second piece of it is the same as everything else. People do business with people they know, trust, and like. So some of it was, let me spend some time. Let me understand how they're going about their practice. Let me understand what they're currently doing, referring to PT, prescribing medication, referring to another specialist. Often if they were the surgeon, they are the specialist in that case. But I started to identify what their key habits already were And then where could I make things easier or better for them and add value to what they were doing? So that sort of started to craft it as well. And then it was a lot about consistency, staying top of mind. These individuals, just like many chiropractors, see a lot of people each day, and habits are hard to break. So there was sort of three big things or rocks that I felt like needed to be moved to really get the referral train moving. And that was one, being consistent with my outreach. Two, focusing on pertinent research that was clinically relevant. And then three, identifying what they currently did and highlighting where I could make things easier or better for them. So those were really the three pillars that started the, foundation of what eventually became the evidence-based chiropractor. But at the time was me trying to build my practice.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that is you answered my question, because I was going to say, okay, come on, you've got to give me a couple of tips for docs listening, thinking, how do I start to improve the relationships with, other physicians, sports therapists in my community. So thank you for that. And really what I'm hearing is like you basically sat back and said, how can I meet them where they are? How can I build relationships with, which is the foundation, I agree with you, to any business. I mean, it's been helping people understand what you do and who you are, but helping them develop a trusting relationship with you. And that across the boards is going to help docs in practice or trying to build relationships with other doctors as well.
Yeah. And one of the things on that sometimes I get asked is that, and maybe a little bit less over the last year, but especially early on, I would get asked a lot from chiropractors, and they specifically for chiropractors, they'd say, but I think it goes cross profession, it was curious. Well, do I have to, what you said is 100% true, meeting them where they're at, but that doesn't mean, and you didn't say this, but this is the question I get asked, does that mean I need to change what I do? And I would say that is definitely not the case. Now you need to meet them where they're at based upon understanding, who they are, what they do. Obviously you need to use terminology that they, understand, right? Just so that they have a foundational level to say, okay, how do basically your goal, if you're trying to build a relationship, is how do I improve trust and reduce friction, to that referral process. But it doesn't mean changing who you are or what you do. I think all of us as healthcare professionals, whether you're a chiropractor or another complementary provider or primary provider, we all have unique skill sets, and we all have the ability to help people, and and being able to clearly identify who those people are. We like to say, who has your patients in their practice, right? If you can figure out who are those complementary healthcare fitness professionals that have your patients in their practice, and then go in there and showcase to them consistently how you make their life easier, build that relationship, build the trust, and continue to reach out. 95% of the sales in the follow-up, as they say. And it does take consistency, much more than one meeting. But at the heart of it is just human to human contact and a personal relationship, I think. And then from on top of that, then you can layer on some of the sophistication. And depending upon the type of provider, some people are going to resonate more with research-based stuff. Some people aren't, and that's cool too. But what I found specifically in the, what I'll call the medical space, orthopedic, surgical, is that they really, in primary care for that matter as well, they really like to be able to kind of lean into a paper and see that sort of stuff. That tends to move their needle a little bit faster and reduce that friction to referral.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love what you said, like, meet them where they are, but don't change who you are.
Well said. That was much better. Yeah, well said.
Yeah, that's also the heart of the show, is like, helping docs, realize who they are, like, who they are as a human being, and then how can they bring that energy into their own unique practice experience, and whether that's going to be clinical practice or doing research or teaching or writing or contributing to the profession or humanity in some other way. You seem to have really zoned in on your superpowers, right? On doing video, doing audio, coaching other docs. Do you miss clinical practice?
I would say a little bit. So I was talking with a friend about it this weekend. I was away for a quarterly summit for one of businesses, and I got asked that specific question, and my answer to it was, it's funny how things come full circle, because now, me and some of my business partners, we geek out about opening a practice as like a lab and being able to install all of our systems and processes sort of in our own practice. So it's funny how things come full circle. I would say the day-to-day of it, I'm very happy with what I do now. I view myself as definitely, a content creator. I view myself as a product person. Ultimately, I like identifying, technology and marketing based products and really systematizing and implementing them across multiple practices. So that's really, I love like tech, marketing, entrepreneurship. So I think I'm in sort of my sweet spot, depends on the day if you ask me, but most days I'm in my sweet spot right now for sure. But there are times where just delivering hands-on care, you do miss that. So I have a table about 6 feet away from me where I, take care of, family and friends and that sort of thing. So I would say, I guess my truthful, completely transparent answer would be, I'm happy to do it right now because I want to with no financial transaction. Gives me like abject joy. And then I get to really focus on, I guess, the business of my life day to day within what I view as my direct sweet spot.
Yeah, I think that's a really honest answer for a lot of docs. I mean, I haven't met anyone who doesn't love the clinical, unless they've had an injury, physical injury or something, but, who doesn't love the interaction, the seeing the results, the quality of life changes that we see in people we look after, the holding babies, if you see kids. Like, I haven't met anyone who doesn't love that part of our profession and our practice. I think what most docs don't like at some point is managing a team or dealing with, marketing or doing business, like the admin business kind of stuff, which, I mean, truthfully, I wasn't trained in that in school. I was trained to be I went to CMCC. I was trained to be a chiropractor. And then I spent all of my time going to extra things to learn how I could be a better chiropractor. Any business training I learned was through trial and error or from other coaches and mentors I had along the way. So I think at the heart for most docs is that heart of wanting to look after people and see the results. And if we could do it without having to put our hands on any of the other stuff, that's even better.
Yeah, I think many chiropractors go into the profession exactly that, because they have sort of that healing heart. And they're really, I have found, and there's drastic exceptions to this on, all over the place, but I've found that most chiropractors are fantastic practitioners. Exactly. They are hands-on healers, but, they weren't necessarily, they were in it for that. They weren't in it to build build their empire. Now they want to have a successful practice. They want to be able to live the lifestyle that they desire and make those connections and all of those wonderful things. But it was based on being the practitioner and being the care provider themselves. And there ends up being sort of that weird, there's almost like a weird disconnect. I agree, where you were so heavily trained, and I see it all the time as well, where I'll see docs that, this is kind of a little bit of a tangential topic, but, I'll see docs that have more letters after their last name than I don't even know what they are. And I'm a chiropractor, yet they struggle to get any sort of traction in their business. And, that's, it hurts your heart when you see those individuals, because they put so much time, effort, and energy into being the best healthcare provider, but there's nobody showing up at their doorstep. And there's like this weird chasm where so many of us, really do, relish and love the care that we deliver and want to be the best at it and take all the time, effort, and energy. But there's a contingent that, of course, and we see it all, you and I see it all the time, that continue to struggle, or just, they need that extra experience. Even though they're not struggling, they need that extra guidance because they never had received it before, to get to where they want to be a little more comfortable, to make a bigger impact, and ultimately to be able to set themselves up to live a fantastic life over time. So I don't know, there's a little bit of there's an interesting dichotomy there within chiropractic, or a little bit of a chasm. I'm sure it takes place in other healthcare professions as well, but I definitely see it, I'm sure, as you do, day in and day out within chiropractic.
Well, yeah, and that's even one of the things that you work with docs on, is helping them market themselves and their practice. So I don't think I think a lot of docs, it's easy for them to share from their heart what they do and why they're doing it. Communication obviously is a skill that we all hone as time goes on as well. But if you were to observe docs trying to share their message in marketing, and what would you say are some of the mistakes you see consistently?
Oh, that's an easy one.
Okay.
Content and consistency. Most docs struggle to create content. Staring at a blank sheet of paper, like, what am I going to talk about today? Like, online is like brutal. Good luck. Like, it's just so hard. So they struggle to make content that, that's at the base level. And then you look at it one level deeper and it's like, okay, now how do you create content that's impactful? Now that's keyword specific, that's going to engage with an audience, that looks awesome, right? All of those things. Content creation is a big game. Like most larger organizations have entire teams that do it. And sometimes it gets relegated to like the youngest person in a chiropractic. Oh, you must know how to do this, right? And there's so much more to it than that. So content is the number one thing, knowing what to create. And then the second piece of it ties right in, right? Consistency. Doing it day after day, after day, after day, after day is also so important. If you're on social, feeds move super fast. So you clearly need to have consistency there, but it extends the other directions as well. Consistency through email. One of the biggest missed opportunities for most healthcare providers is the consistency of emailing and creating good calls to action and developing campaigns. But all of this comes back to sort of strategy. If you don't have an overarching strategy and you don't have the tools and resources, then content and consistency are always going to be an issue. And you'll always be fighting sort of that uphill battle of trying to get things out in time. And so many practices go through that yo-yo where it's like, they're busy, they stop doing marketing activities. They're a little lighter, they do something for a week, and then and they end up on this yo-yo where they just can't get over the hump because they don't have systems and processes and strategy and the ability to create content consistently.
So when you say consistently, are you saying every day, every week, every month?
Yeah, it depends on the platform, right? So, and there's some variation here. I think there's give and take. The way that we go about it is Facebook and Instagram twice per day, YouTube once per week, Google My Business, LinkedIn once per week, and then email minimum one time per week to the whole list. But you might have specific campaigns, like a new patient onboarding campaign that really takes 6-7 emails in the first 2 weeks because you're getting the person up to speed with office policies. You might have some things going on in the background, quarterly reactivation campaigns, which might be 3 or 4 emails in 1 week, to sort of reactivate those patients who haven't come in 60, 90, or 120 days. But in general, what I'd say is you definitely, at the bare minimum, you need to be on those. So if you want to make an impact, if you just want to be on a social channel and not grow, that's one thing. But if you're trying to really utilize the social channel, I would say a minimum of 2 times per day is a good earmark. And I would say from an email perspective, 1 time per week is really the perfect cadence. Last year, we sent about 4.8 million emails for our docs to their clients. So we have a lot of email data in terms of open rates, click-through rates, all of that geeky sort of tech stuff on the back end. But we found that 1 time per week is a really impactful way to go about it on average.
Yeah, and I recommend the same thing. And yet some of my clients were like, but are you sure it's not too much? I'm like, I don't know. I don't think it's too much because people are only taking in, even if you have really great open rates, they're still only maybe 20%. That's
correct.
Right. And so if you overlap your content and you post some on social, some on email, some on YouTube, the likelihood of the same person being inundated with that message from all those platforms is probably really minimal.
Yeah, it's super low. I mean, I think, well, I'll say 2 things about it. One is that the recurrence of the messaging is sort of some of the importance as well, because, the old way, hey, somebody needs to hear something 7 to 9 times. That was kind of like pre-internet. Now, I mean, we each receive something like 10 to 15,000 advertisements and messages each and every day. So I don't even want to know how many touches it takes to make an impact at this point in time. And let me be clear, that doesn't mean just be like annoyingly aggressive, but it means like, hey, you got to be present. You have to be consistent. And you're 100% correct. There's like, you get these like, losses all over the place, right? You put something on Facebook and maybe 1 to 5% of people see it. You send an email, maybe 20% of people open it. So because you sometimes as providers, we get biased because if we're putting it out, we see it all and we're like, wow, this is a lot. But you're right. Only, 1 to 20% of individuals are seeing anything that you put out there. So you want to give them as many opportunities as possible to see it. The other thing is having the coordination of the campaigns across all the platforms, right? So what your email is talking about that week references what was going on Facebook and Instagram. And that mirrors also what's going on in your reception area TV and what your patient handouts, really campaigning. This gets to the strategy aspect of it. When you have campaigns, coordinated campaigns, it's not only more professional, but you start to get syndication benefit, so to speak, across multiple platforms. So somebody that's touched in one place, then they see something in another place, it reinforces that idea, as opposed to being like a haberdashery where it's like something's going out over here about this thing, something's going out about here. And a little bit of that is okay, to have a little bit of differentiation of messages. That's what makes things exciting. You shouldn't, you always want to post natively. You don't want to have the same exact thing. But when you have a monthly campaign, a weekly topic, and a daily post supporting those, you start to really be able to touch people in various ways. And hey, certain people love email, certain people hate email, certain people love Facebook, certain people hate Facebook. So, being active on those primary platforms, you don't want to have like total like FOMO and like just be jumping platforms every like 20 days either. You need to be able to put in some time. But it's pretty clear where the people are now. And, Facebook, Instagram, Google My Business, YouTube, LinkedIn, and email. If you're hitting those, you are probably doing a darn good job giving at least the opportunity to hit 99% of the people who are following you in your practice. Past patients, prospective patients in the future, or active patients today.
Mm-hmm. I'm loving this conversation because, we talked in the pre-chat, like I said, I've got some things I want to talk to you about. However, every show is unique. And this one has been, listeners, like there's been so many practical tips here. One, from how to connect with other healthcare professionals and build relationships with them that still respect your values, your integrity, your style of practice. And now we've just dug into the importance of content marketing and how you need to be consistent, committed to creating good content, and also be really coordinated in your efforts. And if you, going to take out anything from today's episode, I want you to, pick one of those areas and make sure that you dive into that and expand your reach within your communities and even in a bigger impact. Before we wrap up here today, let's talk about what does Dr. Jeff do for fun? I know you're a musician, but you've got 4 companies. We didn't even talk about the other 2. You're a busy guy. How do you make time for the things that make you happy in other ways?
That's a great question. And sometimes I don't do a great job, but I try my best, right? So I'd say, the couple of things that are important to me, or that I try to do every day, is I try to run like 4 to 5 days a week, just like a couple miles here. So I'm fortunate down here in Tampa that it's pretty warm out, and, I live relatively close to the water. So just a couple of blocks, so I can go and have a nice run and make sure I'm getting vitamin D and exercise. And I view that as 2 really important aspects of that. One is, I find it's a great time to ideate. Like I don't track anything. So I don't know if this is a good tip or not, by the way, but I wear like no wearables or anything. I don't listen to podcasts when I run. I just go. And I find that it's good for ideation. And then the second piece of it, obviously, I think it's good for stress reduction and overall health, right? So I try to get out there and run at least 4 to 5 days a week, but that only is like 20 to 30 minutes. So I don't go too far, just a couple miles. But then the other things that I guess I kind of like and kind of geek out on to a certain extent is I played music since I was 18 in bands, and, toured and done that whole thing. So we don't do too much touring now or anything like that, but try to play music at least a couple times per week. Pre-pandemic, my band was rehearsing 1 time per week in our space, and we would play out probably 1 time per month. But now we haven't done that in a little while. We hope to get back to it soon. But I got like all my gear down about 20 feet to the right of me, and then our practice space is just a couple of miles away as well. So I like to do that. And then I have a wife and daughter, so try to get hang time around dinner each and every day to the best of our ability. And my daughter loves roller skating right now, like old school quad skates. And I'm a big like skateboard, surf, snowboard, that kind of guy. So I kind of get out there and skateboard or rollerblade with her while she's on her quad skates, and we're like cruising around the neighborhood, and her wheels light up so you can always see us at night. And so if you're ever in Tampa and you see anybody cruising down, a rollerblader and a young girl on quad skates, it might be me and my daughter.
Yeah, I love it. I mean, look, we're all trying to figure out how to, manage all the different elements of our life, things that give our lives a meaning, between careers and family time and personal health. So it's not an exact science, and we're all trying to figure it out as we go through it. So thanks for sharing those tips. Any parting thoughts before we wrap up today's conversation? I mean, listeners, you'll be able to see all the projects and programs that Dr. Jeff offers in the show notes. But before we wrap up today, any final thoughts or inspiration for docs listening?
I would just tell everybody to kind of keep your head up. I know the last year has been super weird for many people, and sort of isolating, and a varying degree of emotions. And as care providers, that can be challenging, right? So I would just encourage everybody, make sure you're connecting with people, make sure you're keeping your head up, keep doing your best work. Don't get down. You might have some anomalies in terms of numbers and continue to have them, and don't stress out too much about it, but make sure that you're reaching out to, friends and colleagues and having conversations. And probably the final piece of it that I would say as well is, if you need help in a certain area of your practice, don't hesitate to reach out, kind of reemphasizing that, but professionally and personally. I think a lot of times us as healthcare providers, we can become kind of siloed, right? And we're living our life and you're kind of going about, the business, and, things can seem like a struggle at times. And, reaching out to, whether it's personally to a friend or a colleague and having a conversation, I think is super important. But also don't hesitate. There are a lot of people, yourself included, that really provide fantastic opportunities for docs to grow and stretch their comfort zone and, expand what they're able to do and really set themselves up for success in the future. And I would encourage all healthcare providers to, form that team. It's not always that your team is going to be the people in the four walls of your practice each and every day. Make sure you have that support beyond those four walls, because there's a lot of great people out there that are available and willing and able to help, and it could change your life. But you got to be willing to take that action step, tying it back to earlier.
There you go. There you go. Well, and I think the importance of having a team around you, mentorship is huge, right? And I think it's really limiting if people think they should just have one coach or one person to help them in all these different parts of their lives. It's like expecting your partner to be everything for you, when, there's a reason why you have, siblings, friends, other people who can support you in other ways besides that one person. So having a coach or mentor, or investing in programs to help you market, manage your team, personal develop yourself, clinically research, like it's not uncommon for docs, for people of all different disciplines, to have, like you said, a support group around them to help them advance themselves. It doesn't need to be one person. So look at what you need to do in your practice, reach out, and there are plenty of other places to find that kind of support and build your own tribe. So that's great way to wrap up today.
Well, thanks for having me.
I hope you enjoyed today's show. Find out more about today's guests and everything else that we talked about in the show notes. You can also find all this content and so much more, including videos, blog posts, and how you can work with me on the Rockstar Doctor Life website. If you haven't yet reviewed the show, we'd love it if you headed on over to iTunes, subscribe, and leave us a review about what your thoughts are about future episodes for the show and what you like best. Feel free to connect with me on Instagram at Melissa Longo DC, and of course on Facebook. Thanks again for listening. We'll see you next time.